Hi everyone, welcome to Difference Frames the World, a channel that offers you a unique perspective. Please subscribe to the channel so you will not miss our daily uploads. Today, let's talk about the trade war between the United States and China. And in this video, we want to explain why China is winning the upper hand. We have seen the headlines for years, like tariffs, sanctions, and tough talks between Washington and Beijing. For a long time, the story was about two giants throwing punches. But if we take a step back and look at the long game, a surprising and unsettling narrative is emerging for the US. By many measures, China is effectively winning this trade war. Winning is a tricky word. It doesn't mean the US has no power or that China has no massive challenges. But if the goal of the trade war, which the US or Donald Trump initiated, was to curb China's economy, force it to change its state-led industrial policies like the Made in China 2025 and the Belt and Road Initiative, and bring manufacturing back to American shores. By those metrics, the effort has largely failed. Instead, China has adapted, pivoted, and doubled down on a strategy that plays to its unique strengths. Let's break down why this is happening. It's not about one single knockout blow, but a series of strategic victories on different fronts. The first one is the so-called overcapacity argument, which is a sign of American weakness, not Chinese cheating. The US argues that China is producing a massive, unsustainable surplus of goods, especially in green tech like electric vehicles, solar panels, and batteries, and plans to dump them on the global market at artificially low prices, wiping out competitors. But from China's perspective, and in the view of many neutral economists, this isn't cheating. It's the masterful execution of a long-term plan. China sees the alleged flood of electric vehicles as the successful result of decades of strategic investment. Beijing decided that green technology was the industry of the future, and they built the entire supply chain to dominate it, from the mines for lithium and cobalt, to the giant battery factories, to the final car assembly plants. This scale creates incredible efficiencies and lowers costs organically. A Chinese EV can be cheaper not just because of state subsidies, but because they make their own batteries in vast quantities and have perfected cost-effective manufacturing. The rhetoric of overcapacity and unsustainable labels on China is a tactic only. When your competitor achieves something you can't easily replicate, you label it unfair. The US complaint that China's model is unsustainable is, in part, an admission that American companies operating for quarterly profits cannot easily compete with a state playing a 50-year game. China's focus is on global market share and technological supremacy for the next century, not next quarter's shareholder report. For China, September 30th is a normal day, not the last day of a fiscal year, unlike many American companies. To put it simple, China thinks long and the US thinks short. So in this first arena, China is winning because it has built an invulnerable lead in the critical industries of the future through decades of development. When the US hit China with tariffs, the goal was to make China so isolated and economically painful that it would yield to US pressures. It was perhaps the greatest miscalculation. China didn't sit around waiting for the US to change its mind. It aggressively turned elsewhere, deepening its economic and diplomatic ties across the global south. It is arguably China's biggest strategic victory in the trade war, the rise of the global south. While the US focused on rallying its traditional allies in Europe and the G7, China was busy building bridges. Through its massive Belt and Road Initiative, it has financed and built infrastructure in over 150 countries across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. These aren't just roads and ports. They are arteries for Chinese influence and trade, creating a loyal network of partners who rely on Chinese investment. It is noteworthy that the Belt and Road Initiative is the biggest political and economical asset of Chinese President Xi Jinping. Although anti-China channels on YouTube mock him all day and night, they cannot deny the fact that without the Belt and Road Initiative, China would be in a dire situation facing America's punitive tariffs. China is now the largest trading partner for most of Southeast Asia, Africa, and Latin America. It has signed the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, the RCEP, creating the world's largest trading bloc, which notably excludes the United States. So even if the trade between China and the US has stagnated or declined, China's trade with RCEP nations is booming. They have successfully created alternative markets that are larger and growing faster than the traditional Western ones. Notably, Washington's traditional allies, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand, are also RCEP members. While a full-scale shift away from the US dollar is a long way off, China is actively promoting trade in its own currency, the RMB. It's making bilateral currency swap deals with dozens of countries, allowing them to bypass the US dollar and its associated sanctions. It slowly erodes one of America's most powerful financial weapons. DFTW made a video about De-Dollarization before, so we will not discuss it here in details. If you want us to make another video talking about this topic, please tell us in the comments section. In essence, the US tried to put China in a corner, and China responded by building a whole new room. They have made their economy more resilient by making it less dependent on the West. A core goal of the US tariffs was to force companies to leave China for friendlier shores like Vietnam, India, or Mexico. It has happened, but with a cruel twist for American strategy. The China Plus One strategy adopted by many multinationals hasn't meant abandoning China. It's meant keeping their massive, efficient factories in China open while adding a smaller supplementary factory in Vietnam or India to diversify risk. The reason is simple, as no one can bypass China's unrivaled supply chains. You can move a final assembly plant out of China, but you can't easily move the ecosystem of thousands of suppliers providing every tiny screw, microchip, and molded plastic part. China's manufacturing supply chain is the most sophisticated and deeply rooted in the world. Other overwhelming advantages Beijing boasts, like the country's skilled workforce and infrastructure, make it impossible for companies to bet their future on other countries. China has a massive, trained workforce and ports, roads, and rail systems built to ship goods anywhere in the world with stunning efficiency. Furthermore, China is now moving up the value chain. It's no longer just the world's workshop for cheap toys and t-shirts. It's becoming the dominant force in high-value sectors like electric vehicles and batteries, renewables, and critical technologies. China EV companies like BYD are now outselling Tesla in many markets, and Chinese battery giants like CATL and BYD supply most of the world's EV batteries. China manufactures around 80% of the world's solar panels. It's not just participating in the green transition, it is owning the means of production for it. From 5G to drones, China is a global leader, not a follower. Chinese giants like Huawei and DJI have no peers worldwide. So while some low-end manufacturing has left, the high-value strategic industries are digging in deeper. The US succeeded in making it slightly more expensive to make low-margin goods in China, but it failed to stop China's ascent to high-tech supremacy. The trade war and associated technology sanctions had an unintended consequence. It lit a fire under China's drive for technological self-sufficiency. Faced with being cut off from American semiconductors and software, China went into overdrive. The government poured billions into a Made in China 2025 policy, aiming for dominance in core technologies. The semiconductor siege is what the US has thrown on China to stop the country's scientific advance. The US has tried everything it has at crippling China's chip industry, from cutting off access to advanced chip-making equipment to blocking companies like NVIDIA from selling top-tier AI chips. The result? China has redoubled its efforts, achieving a breakthrough in legacy node chips that are crucial for cars, appliances, and even military hardware. While they are still years behind in the most advanced semiconductors, they are rapidly building a self-sufficient industry for the chips that power 90% of the global economy. They are literally building their own walls to protect against future US sanctions. China is also making progress on digital exports. While the West uses Google, Facebook, and Twitter, China has built its own fully functional and in some cases more advanced digital ecosystem. WeChat, Alibaba, Douyin, TikTok's parent, and Baidu. For instance, TikTok's algorithm is a powerful cultural and technological export, a nightmare for US media giants. The US sanctions were meant to stall China's tech ascent, but they have in reality accelerated China's pace to create a parallel, decoupled tech universe that it fully controls. Now let us discuss why the US is struggling to keep pace. It's not that the US lacks innovative companies or a strong economy, but it is fighting this trade war with several key handicaps. First, short sight and long vision. America's corporate world is ruled by quarterly earnings reports and shareholder pressure. 5-year and 10-year plans and 100-year goals frame China's state capitalist model. This fundamental difference means China can tolerate short-term losses for long-term strategic gains in a way that the U.S. simply cannot. Second, political polarization. U.S. trade policy can shift dramatically from one administration to the next, creating uncertainty for allies and businesses alike. China's one-party system provides a level of policy consistency and long-term strategic patience that is a formidable advantage in a protracted conflict. China is a whole country under different leaderships, but the U.S. is literally divided into two nations, even under one president, USA and USB. Third, the inflationary trap. Widespread tariffs, Donald Trump's primary weapon, are essentially a tax on American consumers and businesses. They directly contribute to inflation, which is a hot-button political issue in the U.S., making it politically difficult to sustain or escalate a tariff-based conflict for long periods. China, with its greater state control over the economy, can manage these impacts more effectively. China winning the trade war doesn't mean the U.S. economy collapses. It means that China has successfully navigated America's attempts to contain it and is emerging more resilient, more self-sufficient, and with greater global influence. The world is not decoupling from China as the U.S. hoped. The U.S. strategy of containment through tariffs has, in many ways, backfired. It forced China to build its own alliances, its own tech stack, and its own resilient economic model. The U.S. now faces a competitor that is less dependent on it than ever before. The trade war began with the U.S. trying to change China. It is ending with China successfully changing the world around it, building a new global economic order where it sits firmly at the center.